Welcome back to another edition of Drop the Mitts Hockey Podcast, brought to you in partnership with Primetime Production. Today we have one of my favorite people in the entire game of hockey. Grew up watching him, listening to all his, unbelievable takes, his analysis. Longtime NHL analyst and two-time Stanley Cup winning analyst, Pierre McGuire. Pierre, how are you?
I'm excellent, Chris. Nice to visit with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Honestly, it's an honor, and like I said, I grew up watching, and you're between the glass, just an absolute legend. It's a staple of my childhood.
Well, you're
Watching
very
hockey.
kind. I'm old, but I'm not that old yet. But I'm getting there.
We a lot has happened. I mean, obviously, I got to thank Jimmy Murphy as well, for kind of for putting us in contact with each other, and another unbelievable guy. I know you and him are close. You guys have a unbelievable podcast going. So got to thank him. But we've had a ton of news over the past couple days that have happened.
Yes.
Most recently, this trade that happened last night kind of felt like out of nowhere. Philadelphia sends Cutter Gauthier to the Anaheim Ducks, and the Anaheim Ducks send to Philly Jamie Drysdale and a 2025 second round pick. It feels like this kind of came out of nowhere. What were your thoughts when you first heard the news?
I thought it was April Fool's early, to be
Right,
honest. I really did. Just based on what Cutter had done, obviously at the World Junior this year, what he had done at the World Junior last year, what he's done at Boston College through 2 years, especially this year, the numbers are obviously speaking for themselves. Jamie's a very good player. I'm going to tell you right now, I know Jamie Drysdale very well as a player because my son grew up playing against him. He was playing
right.
up in Toronto. My son was playing for Mid Fairfield in Connecticut, and they also played in the brick tournament against one another. So I've been watching him for a long time. Tremendous talent, but he's also had a ton of injuries, and it's early on in his career right now. So I was really surprised. If you look at Philadelphia's organizational needs and you look at Anaheim's organizational needs, you see it and you're going, okay, I kind of get why Anaheim would do that because they're stockpiled defense, Chris. But if you look at why Philly would do that, there's more to this story than I think is coming out. That's all I want to say. The compensation is nice going back to Philadelphia, but I don't think it's as much as it could have been.
Right, yeah, and it just seems like we heard from Danny Briere, we heard from and just in his the way that he kind of talked about it, it just feels like this has been kind of ongoing for a while now. This isn't something that just all of a sudden popped up. And you said it best. I mean, I feel like this is a really good return for both teams. I mean, it's just a deal that makes sense for both. Jamie Drysdale is, you mentioned, one of those guys. I feel like he just hasn't come into his own yet. But still, as the sixth overall pick, it's something that Philly needs is that puck moving defenseman. And then obviously for Anaheim, Cutter Gauthier, what he's done in the NCAA and the World Juniors, which we'll get into in a little bit, because I know we're both, World Junior junkies. And yeah, this trade, I thought it was an April Fool's joke too, because I was like, there's no way. It just came out of nowhere.
Yeah. I'm gonna trust everybody that's been involved in terms of how they've put their spin out there. I'm talking about the management people from Philadelphia and say, okay, they're telling the truth. I also know Pat Verbeek. I coached him, the general manager out in Anaheim, and he's a no nonsense guy. So I believe what he's saying as well. I think they've probably had discussion for a while. Obviously, the people from Philadelphia put it out there, Chris, that Keith Jones and Danny Briere flew over to Sweden to try to meet with Cutter Gauthier. Gauthier wouldn't see them, according to them. And so I'm going to trust them and believe them. And I have every reason to trust and believe them. I worked with Keith Jones for 16 years, so
Right.
I have every reason to believe them. But I also know that they went over and met him, but he wouldn't meet with them. So they had to do something because clearly something was not right. If a young player at 19 is telling an organization doesn't want to go there, something had to happen along the way. We just don't know what that something is right now.
Right, for sure. Now, do you think one team won this trade over the other?
Too early to tell. What I would just say is I don't think the compensation going to Philadelphia will be enough long term because players like Goche, big power forward type players. I'm not saying he's going to be a physical wrecking machine because he's not. That's not his thing. He's speed. He's a shooter. He's a dominant puck possession player. He's really good. And you look at just think about this: Mason McTavish, Trevor Zegras, Leo Carlson. You start looking at the young pieces they have up front. Now you're starting to get to, wow, these guys could be really good for a 7 to 10 year window because they do have unbelievable depth on defense and they've got great depth in goal. So it's going to be interesting to see. They just can't score.
Right.
For Philadelphia, they're still well into and they're way ahead of schedule, by the way. So hats off to John Tortorella.
Right.
They're way ahead of schedule. But do I think this is fair compensation for Philadelphia? I think long term people will say we could have got more. We could have got more.
Yeah, I agree. And what's kind of crazy, what I was thinking about too, because I was recently looking at some mock drafts and stuff for this upcoming draft. I mean, there's a possibility that Anaheim could very well land a Macklin Celebrini. Like it's not completely out of the question. Do you see them going more forward in this upcoming draft with this move? Like, do you think this move changes anything in terms of their plan in the upcoming draft? Do you think they go defenseman?
Well, they got plenty of defense. Zellweger, don't forget, is playing down in San Diego
Right.
right now. And I got to think, they're a young group down in San Diego. They're not very good. They're second to last in their division in the West of the American Hockey League. But they've got some players evolving. They also have Ian Moore, who's injured right now, playing at Harvard University. I mean, they got a lot of guys on defense coming up. They had so much depth, they traded Henry Thrun,
Right.
one of their prospects, up to San Jose. So, again, you look at it, I don't know what they'd want to do. I think Pat probably wants to take the best available player. I mean, if they fall at one, there's no question they're taking
Right.
Brady. I mean, I'm actually, Chris, being transparent. I'm going to watch Northeastern BU tonight over at BU. So part of why I'm going is to go watch Macklin. So there.
And I like you watch him on TV. I got the opportunity to watch him a couple times this year over at Aganis, and like the speed that he has, like the TV doesn't even do it justice. And I've seen a lot of players like that, like I'm not saying he has Connor McDavid speed, but to be able to witness it in person, to see how fast
Yeah.
he thinks the game and just his overall speed, he's unbelievable for a 17-year-old, what he's doing in the college hockey ranks.
What I try to explain to people is I think Brady Tkachuk's one of the best power forwards we've had come out of college hockey in a long time. Brady Tkachuk's draft year, he had 8 goals.
Right.
Macklin Celebrini is going to score 21, 25. He's going to be between 20 and 25. He is. So, that's
He's
pretty good.
unbelievable.
And Brady's a heck. I don't have to tell you, Brady's a heck of a player.
Right.
So, I look at a lot of different things. The thing about Celebrini to me is he's a scorer, yes, but I think he's a far better playmaker, and his peripheral vision at a high rate of speed is phenomenal. It's as good as anybody I've seen in the last 15 years. It really is.
So, and I kind of thought this before the World Juniors. There was a little bit of conversation. Could it be Celebrini? Could it be Iserman? Do you think this World Junior tournament like completely put Celebrini ahead of everyone? There's no question he's going number one overall.
Unless he gets hurt or has bad interviews, I think he's going number one. And that's not a knock on Cole Eiserman. Cole Eiserman's
Right.
a really good player. I mean, he's an unbelievable scorer. I'm still surprised he wasn't, even though the Americans won, so you can't really pick on them.
Right. Right.
You could pick on Canada because I just finished coming from Orono, Maine, and I watched Bradley Nadeau play. And for a team that needed offense, Team Canada, Bradley Nadeau would have been a real good fit for Team Canada.
Agreed.
But all that being said, I don't think you can fault the Americans with their roster creation. But Cole Eiserman's a really good player. I
You
mean,
br-
there's probably going to be after Celebrini, it's probably going to rock and roll until probably the 10th pick, where some guys think, oh, he's going to go at 2, he'll go at 4. Some guys think he got to go at 5, he might go at 3. So
yeah.
I think that's going to be the undulation you'll see in the draft this summer.
It's funny you bring up Bradley Nadeau. He's another kid that's unbelievable, and I thought he was the biggest snub in the entire out of any of the rosters. I was shocked that he didn't make that team because you mentioned how badly that Canada team needed offense, and he would have been a perfect fit. I mean, I think there's no doubt that he makes the team next year. But what do you think the rationale was for not, not choosing a guy like Bradley Nadeau?
Um, Celebrini is a college player from Boston University, and Matthew Wood was a college player, or is a college player at a University of Connecticut. The Canadian national program is really heavily indebted, and they deserve to be, to the major junior operators. So there's always a slight bent towards, if it's an even situation, they'll always take the major junior player. There's not a lot of college kids that get an opportunity to play for Team Canada. It's just a reality of the situation. Hey, look, Canada's system has been unbelievably successful, Chris.
Right.
They've been amazingly successful.
For sure.
That's why I think, Bradley Nadeau probably didn't get a longer opportunity to be part of the team.
That makes sense. Another thing I kind of wanted to bring up to you for sure is this William Nylander extension.
Mhm.
Another one. He got a lot of money. This you got to wonder where all this money's coming from in Toronto.
In
Um,
the ticket buying public.
right. Yeah. Uh, what was your thought when you saw this extension? Did you think it would happen this early in the season? Um, and what do you think this means for some of these other guys like Mitch Marner, John Tavares? I mean, you got to Austin Matthews is obviously going to be on the team for the future. What do you think this means for those guys?
Well, it's going to be interesting for John Tavares. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent in 2025, so he's got another year of contract time. Same with Mitchell Marner; he'll be an unrestricted free agent in 2025. The way I look at it is Nylander's locked up till 2032. Matthews is locked up till 2028, if I remember correctly. And Morgan Riley's locked up to 2030. So most of their big core players are locked up long term now. Nylander, 2032. So that's interesting. I think the best prospects they have. Toronto's two best prospects are not in the NHL right now. One is Easton Cowan, and the other one is Fraser Minton. And both of them will be on entry level, so that will kind of help them a little bit. I don't see either one of those guys playing in the American League. I think they'll go right up to the NHL. But the problem for Toronto, it's going to be how do they have enough assets financially within the cap to go out and get what ails them, and what ails them is defense. They're not good enough or deep enough on defense. So that's going to be the interesting thing for Brad Treliving, the general manager in Toronto. I just I don't know what he's going to do. I really don't.
Right. You mentioned, I mean, that's a lot of money to be putting up for, just a forward group. I mean, it's a lot of money. And you mentioned it. Their biggest ailment isn't forward. It's defense and you could argue goaltending at this point. But I really liked what I saw from Joseph Wall before he got injured.
I
Um,
agree. We're on the same page. I completely agree. Joseph's done really, really well before he got hurt. Totally
for
agree, Chris.
For sure, yeah. It again, it makes me wonder what they're gonna do on defense. I really like Easton Cowan and Mitten as well. Like I think they looked really good in that tournament.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, Mitten was the captain of that Canada team. I think he was getting a lot of slack. For as far as a leader goes. But I think overall, like I think he's a good player. I think I liked what I saw from him.
No,
Um,
both those kids are really talented. Cowan's farmer strong. He's not really big. He's just a strong kid, but he's not really big. Fraser Minton's a kid from the west coast of Canada. He's going to come in. He'll give him a little bit of skill, a little bit of speed, a little bit of reach, a little bit of size, and he can finish plays off. He got a little taste this year. I think he realized he wasn't ready for it. The World Junior, even though they didn't win, will help him. Those are two A-level prospects for Toronto, so that's good news for them.
right.
And again, they're still on entry level, so that helps with the cap, alleviates a little bit of pressure. But I think at some point there's going to be one odd man out here,
Right.
and I hate to speculate, but you got to think it's going to be Marner. It just
I agree.
you have to think.
I agree, and I can't even imagine what that return is gonna look like. I mean, depending on timing and when they decide to actually pull the trigger, I mean, you gotta think it's gonna be a pretty return for them.
Well, Mitchell's a really good player.
Right,
Um,
right,
if you would have traded Patrick Kane in his prime, and that's who Marner's a
right.
lot like, what do you think the return would have been for Chicago if you would
Oh
have
my
traded?
god, I can't even imagine.
So, yeah, it's interesting.
So, again, I mentioned a little bit earlier in the, episode doing the intro that, you're a big World Junior guy. You are unbelievably, well versed in prospects and everything, and that's one of my favorite things to study and talk about. Um, what were some of your takeaways of this World Junior Tournament as a whole? Players that stood out to you, teams that stood out to you. And I also wanted to talk about some of these guys that, are 2024 draft eligible that some people might not know a lot about that really stood out to you.
So first of all, I'm going to say this was one of the most dangerous World Juniors I've ever seen, and by dangerous, I don't mean dangerous on the ice. This is one of those danger areas for scouts because if you look at some of the teams that were there, the Latvians weren't particularly good, the Germans weren't particularly good, the Swiss weren't particularly good, and the Norwegians weren't particularly good. So you had four teams where teams are running up the numbers against them, so players were getting inflated numbers. Number one, that's a really important thing for scouts to pay attention to. The second thing is this was not a super elite team from Finland. It was a competitive team, hardworking team. They weren't super elite like they usually are, and that speaks to them losing the bronze medal because I can tell you right now they are the kings of the bronze medal game. The numbers will say that, and I've seen it over the course of my career. And then the other thing is no Russian participation. So it changes the dynamic of the tournament significantly, Chris.
Right.
It really does. So I thought this was a dangerous World Junior tournament from a scouting perspective. That's what I thought. Now, in terms of teams that impressed me, I was really impressed by Sweden. Most of the tournament, they were really, really good, not just offensively, defensively, structurally, coaching wise. They played an entertaining style, still very responsible defensively. They understood how to defend on big ice. I think their first four games, they didn't give up a goal. I mean, it was
Right.
phenomenal what they were doing. So they impressed me. The Americans impressed me the entire tournament. Quick strike offensive capability. The Boston College line, obviously, Ryan Leonard and Perot and Will Smith. That line was outstanding for the Americans. The way Lane Hudson pushed the pace of the game from the back end, I thought was great. The depth and goal with Augustine and Fowler, I thought was phenomenal for the Americans. So I thought the Americans were a great story. The player that probably impressed me the most that most people don't know is Yuri Kulich of the Czech Republic,
Yeah.
or Czechia, they call it now.
Right.
Um, I go back to going over there watching Jaromir Jagr play when it was called Czechoslovakia. So it's, keep changing the names. Um, and I would just say he's a player that's playing in the American League right now, and I can't think there's too much more for him to prove in the American League. He really, really, really impressed me a lot. Dvorsky, the St. Louis pick, Dalibor Dvorsky, really impressed me a ton. He's not that far from being NHL ready. So there are some other players in the tournament where you say pretty good, pretty good.
You mentioned Yuri Kulich. It's funny you say that because I got the opportunity to watch him at the Prospect Challenge in Buffalo,
Yeah.
and the three that stood out as far as Buffalo prospects were Yuri Kulich for sure, Zach Benson, who made the team, and then Matt Savoy as well.
Mhm.
Who this what Buffalo has coming up is a very special group, and they've already taken care of their decor as far as Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin. I mean, this is going to be a really dangerous group here going forward. Do you think there's any chance that both Savoy and Coolidge get called up this season?
Well, I could see Kulik for sure. I don't know about Savoy because he's coming off an injury, I think, from the World Junior, right? He wasn't
He
100.
was he was injured. Yeah, he got injured, but
So we'll
Coolidge
see.
for sure, he's ripping it up down there.
Yeah, but here's the thing with Buffalo, and I think they're going to figure this out as a coaching staff and as a managerial team. They have a lot of the same players. I mean, they got excessive skill. They have an unbelievable array of skill. They
Right.
really do. They have to identify deeper in the lineup how they can maintain and sustain leads when they're on the road in particular. And you don't do that with slicksters. You do that with guys that are tough.
Right.
And I think there's a fine line they're going to have to figure out in Buffalo in terms of team building exercise. And I think they understand that now. Just listening to some of the quotes you hear from Donnie Granato from time to time, their coach. So I think they're starting to understand that. So I don't know if all those young players will be there when it's all said and done, but they've done a nice job really identifying talent and skill in Buffalo for sure.
Yeah, you exactly right. Like the fact that they've been able to hit on a lot of these picks. I mean, Zach Benson, the latest one, right? Like fell to 13th overall. I mean, he's looking like a top 5 pick at this point.
And
or it's very early to tell, but he's looked very good.
I agree. Benson's skill level is excessive. Obviously, you wish he was a little bit bigger, but he's going to be surrounded by some. Tage Thompson's not a small guy.
Right.
They got so getting Jack Quinn back really helped them too this year. You see when Jack's been able to play in games, he's shooting the puck unbelievable. That's his thing. He's a gunner. He's a shooter. JJ Paterka is another one of those guys. So they've got just a steady array of talent there in Buffalo, no question.
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of want to get into like you personally, your career, how you started out. I was reading your bio. I knew you were a coach at Babson. My sister went to Babson. Unbelievable campus, beautiful school. Can you talk to us about how you got started, how you landed that job, and how you landed in the game of hockey starting out?
Well, I was a kid that grew up in Montreal. I was a huge Montreal Canadiens fan. I played a lot of sports growing up, football, hockey, and baseball in particular. I left Montreal when I was 15, turning 16, to go to a high school in New Jersey called Bergen Catholic High School. It's a big time football program, big time sports school, very good academic school. Ended up being the starting quarterback of the football team there. Played on the hockey team there. We won, championship there in hockey. We played in the state final 2 years in a row in football. We didn't win, but we played the same team 2 years in a row. It was unbelievable how competitive it was. I went to Hobart College for 4 years. I played football, hockey, and baseball there. I graduated in 4 years with a degree in English. After my senior year of hockey, I was contacted by a team in Europe. I signed with them. I played for a year, and then halfway through my season in Europe, I was contacted by the New Jersey Devils. I signed with them as a player. Came back from Europe, and at the end of training camp, I got sent to the minors, and I didn't want to do that. So I was thinking about going back to Europe, Chris, believe it or not. And
Really?
instead, I got offered a coaching job, and the coaching job was a pretty cool story. My first coaching job, I paid $500 for the year. I'm not kidding you. He gave me an apartment, a meal ticket at the cafeteria, a car to go recruiting, a charge card so I could put gas in it. And then I would work as a substitute school teacher at the Geneva High School in Geneva, New York. And I worked on Sundays at a friend of mine's bar called Ronnie's Cedar Inn, where I'd make $100 every Sunday, and all the hamburgers I could eat. So it was really good. It was a good deal. And so that's how I started. And then after 1 year of that, I went to Babson. I was there for 3 years, and I ran tons of hockey schools, and I had an amazing relationship with Steve Sterling, who was the athletic director and head coach, and also Dick Flood, who ran his camp called the Europa Cup. And we put so many good players through that for so many years. And then after 3 years there, I went to St. Lawrence University, where I had an unbelievable opportunity to work with one of the greatest gentlemen in college hockey history, Joe Marsh.
Yeah.
And we won a ton there. I think we produced 11 players that played in the NHL, maybe 12, but it was great. And after my second year, I got approached by the Pittsburgh Penguins to go work with Scotty Bowman and Craig Patrick and Bob Johnson. So it broke my heart to leave Joe Marsh and St. Lawrence, but that's kind of how everything got going for me.
What you mentioned a couple of legends there. Like, what was first to start off Scotty Bowman to get to work for a guy like Scotty? Like, what were your biggest takeaways? Like, I can't imagine. Like, there must be so much that you learned from him. But as
Every day. Well, one of the best lessons I ever got, I'll never forget the first draft in 1990. We were on the football field floor in Vancouver. There were 50,000 people in the stadium that day for the NHL draft. It's the largest attended draft in draft history. And Badger Bob Johnson grabs me and he says, "Here's the one key for you, because you're young and you're aggressive." I go, "What's that?" "Learn something new every day. Keep your ears open." And I took him at his word, and I really try to live my life like that every day. Try to learn something new every day. Badger was an amazing man. I'm so grateful for the time I had to work with him and win with him. And I learned so much from him, so much from Craig Patrick, so much from Scotty Bowman. Scotty and I were roommates. I don't know if you're aware of that, but we were
no
roommates.
way, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we were roommates. And his wife had the best line of all. I don't know. We're in the middle of pretty good run in Pittsburgh. She came down from Buffalo, and she looked at me. She goes, "How's it going?" I said, "Oh, it's going great." She goes, "What do you guys do?" I said, "Well, we watch hockey at the rink, we coach, get on the plane, come back, eat. That's what we do." She goes, "Better you than me."
Hey, you can't beat that lifestyle. I mean, that's
She was
all the
kidding, but it was
essentials.
fun.
That's awesome. You have extensive, you know, what am I trying to say? Like experience, sorry. So you have a ton of experience as far as scouting, as far as, evaluating players. Um, for someone, I mean, a lot of us just watch the game, right? We don't really pay attention to, we're just kind of watching. When you're evaluating players, what are your biggest things that you look for in a player? I mean, I guess it depends all on what that specific team needs, but when you're evaluating a player, what types of things do you look for in that player?
The first thing is character. Second thing is coachability. Third thing is how tough they are. Those three things matter a lot. And people say, well, how do you identify character? A guy that's prepared to turn the other cheek, a guy that plays disciplined, a guy that will sacrifice his body for the well being of the team, a player that will move the puck rather than try to be selfish. Character comes in so many different ways, and every single player, their character can be quantified in a different way. Coachability matters a ton, especially in the NHL, because most of the players are pretty similar. So if you get players that don't listen and can't be coached, you can't really make an impact on their careers. And then toughness matters. This is a hard game played by really tough people with no out of bounds. Everybody goes fast. They all have a stick in their hand. It's a weapon. And so if you're not tough, you're going to have a hard problem playing for a long time. There are other subtle things. Like I like players that can skate. I like big players. I like players that know how to pass the puck. I like guys that play as teammates. I like guys that aren't individuals. I like guys that really understand how to make players around them better. I look for forwards. I look for line drivers, guys that make the line better. For defensemen, I look for guys that understand their responsibility. If you're supposed to be a shutdown guy, be a shutdown guy. If you're supposed to be a puck mover, be a puck mover. I'll never forget watching the New Jersey Devils in the 90s, actually coaching against them. They had Scott Stevens and Ken Danico and Sean Chambers, three huge guys that could shut you down and pile drive you right through the boards. Then on the other side, they had a guy by the name of Scott Niedermayer, and you just gave him the puck, and he was a one-man breakout.
Right.
It was almost impossible. It was kind of like the Rangers. We played them in the 92 second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs, and they had Jeff Bukaboom on the right side and Brian Leach on the left side, and all Bukaboom did was block for Leach.
Right.
Leach would get the puck, and it was right up and out of the zone. So
Yep.
never put the puck on Leach's side. Put it on Bukaboom's side. Just things like that. So I look for a lot of different things, but those three things at the beginning, I think character, coachability, and toughness really matter.
So to go along with that, have there ever been any players that you kind of not that people didn't necessarily agree with you that you evaluated that ended up being phenomenal players that some people were just like, like we don't really see it, and then they ended up being very good, and then
I got a couple of them. One would be Ian Moran, who we took in Pittsburgh. I think we took him in the 6th or the 7th round of the 90
yep,
draft. He was at Belmont Hill. I'd had him on the ice as a kid in camp. I'd watched him play a ton at Belmont Hill. I was really intrigued by how smart he was and how passionate he was about the game. He ended up playing 11 years of pro.
right.
11 years. I was a 6th or 7th round pick when it was a 12-round draft. I mean, that's a heck of a career. And then Marcus Naslund. We took Marcus in Pittsburgh in 91, just after Kovalev. And Marcus had just an amazing career, not so much in Pittsburgh because they traded him. After Scotty went to Detroit, I went to Hartford, and Barry Smith went to Detroit. He didn't have anybody else in the organization really stepping up for him. So they traded Marcus for Alex Stoyanov, and that ends up being one of the worst deals in NHL history.
Yeah.
Great for Vancouver, bad for Pittsburgh. But a lot of people didn't think Marcus was ever really going to turn out, and he obviously did. And the reason why they didn't think he'd turn out is Peter Forsberg was his centerman, and Peter was so darn good.
Right.
And Marcus was pretty darn good too. I don't know. Hard to say about you take so many players in the middle rounds and end up playing 3 to 5 years or 6 years, and you say, man, that kid did so well. So there'd be a large number of those. But I would say Ian Moran really stood out. I remember when we drafted him, one of the scouts from another team came up to me and says, and I was like, in scouting parlance, that means he's small. He's never going to play.
Yeah,
And I'm like, okay, we'll see. And he did for 11 years. So it was good.
yeah. You ended up being definitely right about that one. He's an
Well, it
awesome
was the
guy.
whole staff. It wasn't just me. It was our whole staff. But
Right.
that's what I just remember, a couple guys looking over our table when we took him. They're like, oh, he's too small. It worked out
That's
okay.
awesome. You're a two-time Stanley Cup champion with Pittsburgh, obviously. Some absolute legends on that team. What was your time like? Those years with those two cups, playing with or coaching those legends, and what was your time like in Pittsburgh?
Surreal. Grateful for every single day I spent in that organization. So appreciative to Mr. Patrick and the late Bob Johnson, to Scotty Bowman for hiring a 29, 28, turning 29-year-old kid. Um, just really, really grateful. Mario Lemieux, Brian Trottier, Ronnie Francis later on, Kevin Stevens, Mark Recchi, Rick Tocchet, Ulfie Samuelson, Shell Samuelson, Joey Mullen. I can go down the line, Yarmer Yager, Troy Loney, Phil Bork, so many good people. All just so grateful for having gotten to know them and to work with them. For a lot of those players, they were so good. Half of those guys are Hall of Famers. You don't really have to coach those guys; you have to maintain them. It's really important.
Right.
Never take away the creativity of a great player. So Mario, everybody said, "What's it like to coach Mario?" I always tell people, I never coached Mario. I maintained him.
Right.
There's a big difference. I'll tell you a quick story, Chris, about Mario. This is about the character aspect of a player that a fan would never see. We were taking a commercial flight to Vail, Colorado for training camp. Half the team was playing an exhibition game in New York, and I took the other half with me to Vail. Mario happened to be the half that came with me to Vail. It was a late flight. I think we were about 2 hours late, an hour and 45 minutes, whatever. And there were no cell phones then. So I called the office and I said, we're going to be late for our ice time up in Vail. And Craig Patrick, the general manager, says, doesn't matter. Get on the ice. We rented the ice all night. We owned the rink for the rest of the week. Put the guys on the ice. So I went to Mario knowing that probably wasn't going to be a popular decision. And Mario said to me, we'll practice as long as we eat. So what do you mean? He goes, well, just pull over somewhere. So we pull over at some fast food place. I don't know which one it was. There's so many: McDonald's, Wendy's, I don't know, Burger King. I have no idea. We pulled over. We guys ate their hamburgers on the bus or whatever. We get up to Vail, let them check in the hotel. We go right to the rink. If you ask any player that was there, Paul Coffey, Mark Recchi, Yarmer Yager, ask anybody that was at that practice that day, they will tell you they never saw Mario Lemieux do the things that he did in that practice before, and they never saw him do it again. He put on a show that was crazy, crazy, and it set the tone for the entire training camp, Chris.
Unbelievable.
It was, and that was the character that I was alluding to. That was a great display of leadership and character. He didn't whine, he didn't complain. He just went out there and did it, and all the other guys had to follow. It was phenomenal to watch. It really was.
That's unreal. Yeah, I mean, obviously I didn't get to grow up and watch him, but even just being able to go back and watch some of his highlights and the things that he was able to do on the ice was just unbelievable. I mean, that's why he's considered one of the greats.
If you get a chance, Chris, go watch the goal shorthanded against Raymond Bork in 1992 Eastern Conference Final. Mario walks Raymond. It's unbelievable. And then go watch him in Pittsburgh in 91, the final against Minnesota. He goes through, I think it's Brian Glynn and Sean Chambers. I could be wrong, but I think it's those two guys in defense. And then it's John Casey in goal. John Casey in goal. It's just unbelievable. Some of the stuff you see him do, it's like playing a video game.
Right.
He's just so good. It's ridiculous.
My dad has told me, we're both huge hockey fans and whatever, but he's told me that two of the best players that he's ever seen was Mario Lemieux in the early '90s. He was able to see him a few times, and as well as Paul Kariya during his time at Maine, he got the opportunity to go watch the Black Bears and, watch him. And he said the video that you see now doesn't even do it justice of how fast he was.
I remember I was coaching the Hartford Whalers, and Brian Burke was our general manager. And Brian said to me, "We're playing in Boston on Saturday night," and they checked the schedule, and Maine is playing at Boston College. Want to go to the game? I said, "Absolutely." So the afternoon before the game, Brian and I went to the game to watch Paul Kariya play against BC. And you're 100% right, Chris. His acceleration with and without the puck was phenomenal. The ability to make the players around him better was off the charts. And you could just see he had a flair for the dramatic. Not an overly large guy, but man, oh man, was he good. He was really good.
Right.
And what a career he had. What an amazing NHL career Paul had. Phenomenal.
Yeah, for sure. And you just mentioned, Hartford, Hartford Whalers in Connecticut, not too far from where we're at, it's where my dad works. Um, can you talk to us about, your time in Hartford and what it was like being a part of that organization? There have been talks about, another expansion team possibly coming into the league at some point in the future. Do you think Hartford could possibly land a team again? Is there, or do you think their time is kind of past?
Well, I don't think any time's ever passed. I'd like to see Hartford and Quebec. I mean, Winnipeg got its second chance to get a
Right,
team. I think the market in Hartford's just as vibrant as the market in Winnipeg. In fact, maybe more so.
right,
I think Quebec deserves another opportunity to have a team. We'll see whether they get one or not. So I don't think you can ever shut the door on anybody. I enjoyed my time in Hartford. I thought we were going to be able to really turn the corner. We weren't able to do that. There was an ownership change. I didn't last as long as I wanted to there because of the ownership change, which I totally understand. But I really enjoyed my time there. I enjoyed living there. Made a lot of friends there. It was the best airport for an NHL team. You could just fall out of bed and get right to Bradley Field. It was
right.
easy. So no, I don't know. I there's one of those where our team wasn't ready to win, and what happened was it was really tough. Brian Burke was our general manager. He hired all of us. He had put together a really solid plan, Chris. And then after 9 months, Gary Bettman approached him and asked him to come work at the league. So we lost our general manager after 9 months, and that changed the whole flow of what we were trying to accomplish. And if you look at it, after we all got let go, it was another 5 years before they actually played a playoff game. So it wasn't easy. The rebuild was well on its way after year one, and then it kind of got dismantled because Brian was approached by the league to go work there.
Right. You had, from where I remember you, right, and just seeing you on the TV I watch as much hockey as I can. Your time at TSN, between the glass. Um, what would you say your most memorable game, or is there a most memorable moment you've had working between the glass, that something that just pops out in your mind as something like you'll never forget?
The Crosby goal in 2010 at the Olympics, he was yelling, "Iggy, Iggy, Iggy." I'm telling you, and you could hear it. It was so amazing. And the crowd was just frantic. It was crazy. But I could hear it at ice level. And so that was one moment for sure. Patrick Kane's game winning goal against Philadelphia in 2010 was pretty amazing. The Boston Bruins Stanley Cup victory in 2011 in Vancouver. That series was unbelievable. The coast to coast travel, 7 games, the
Yeah.
roller coaster ride that was that series. And then being on the ice interviewing one of my old players, Mark Recchi, that was his last game. And all the travel we had done together over time, whether it was skating together or traveling together. And to see him go out on top was amazing and very emotional. 2007, Anaheim beating Ottawa. At the end of the game, I interviewed with Timu Solani. He broke down. I knew Timu for so long, and I almost broke down because of it. I will never forget that. That was a fantastic final for Anaheim. It really helped change the culture of hockey in California in '07, and then that helped build up for the great Kings teams that we saw, from 2011 to about 2016 or 17. So lots of good stuff, lots of really good memories. No
Yeah.
bad ones. No bad ones.
Right, and, like, all those moments that you mentioned, like, I remember growing up watching all those things, especially, like, the Bruins Stanley Cup being in Mass, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
remembering how much of a bloodbath that series was and just how crazy it was. Um, and so most recently, you worked, for the Ottawa Senators, um, as I wanna make sure I get the title correct. Um, hold Anyways, you worked for the Ottawa Senators, right?
Yeah,
And
I
I
was senior vice president in charge
yeah, I had it up and then it closed out when I was trying to start the recording. Sorry about that. What was your time like in Ottawa? Obviously they were going through a little bit of a rebuild at that time. What was your time like there? And then my biggest question to you would be, would you ever consider, another leadership role like that? A GM role, um, or something similar to what you had in Ottawa?
My time in Ottawa was great, number 1. Number 2, it's painful to think about because we were well on our way to getting things really cleaned up there, and then Mr. Melnick, the person that hired me, passed away. He was the owner of the team,
Right.
and after Mr. Melnick passed away, it wasn't too long afterwards that I was relieved of my duties, and that was painful just because I cared so much about what we were doing there. Had amazing relationships internally with all the staff members, the scouting staff, the training staff, the coaching staff. Some of the best memories I have in hockey, going down and working with our coaches in the American Hockey League and seeing them make the playoffs for the first time in 5 years in Belleville was great. Such good people. So I have really fond memories. Watching a young Tim Stutzla play, watching a young Josh Norris play, watching a young Shane Pinto play. Just really, really good memories. So no, nothing bad. No, nothing bad. The only bad was when I was told that I wasn't going to be working there anymore. A lot of obviously was good to the owner passing away.
Yeah, it's too bad. I mean, like I said, you're one of the most gifted hockey minds too. Like it's unbelievable. Your analysis on player development, everything is unbelievable, second to none. Um, Pierre, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join this podcast. It's a very new podcast, so I literally never thought I'd have the opportunity to get to talk to you ever. And it's one of the biggest honors in my life being able to talk to you and talk hockey.
Well, I'm going to thank you, Chris. I keep selling the game, keep growing the game. It's my honor, it's my pleasure to be with you, and I love the entrepreneurial spirit that you have, and I love the fact you want to help grow the game. And that's one of the reasons why we started our podcast, Jimmy Murphy and I. We just want to tell good stories about the game,
Right.
about the people in the game, whether it's on the women's side, the men's side, high school, prep school, junior, major, junior, doesn't matter. I think it's really important. I learned this from the late great Herb Brooks. Right after the '02 Olympics, we were sitting at a establishment in Salt Lake City, Utah, and he said, "You have a responsibility to help grow the game and use it." And I said, "You know what, Coach? I will. I'll do it as best I can." So I really commend you for what you're doing, Chris. Thank you for having me on. It means a lot.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I owe everything to the game of hockey. Because I came home from being in the military. I got medically retired, and I just was really down in the dumps with everything, and just really struggling being home. And hockey is what kind of brought me back. So honestly I owe everything to the game of hockey. It's what got me back to happiness. So again, this is one of those full circle moments for me where being able to talk to a childhood hero, right? And just unbelievable. I can't thank you
Are
enough.
you saying I'm old, Chris?
Well,
Thank you very much for having me on. It means a lot. Thank you.
awesome. Thank you so much. So that was Pierre McGuire for episode 29. Unbelievable episode. Can't thank him enough for being on. Um, You can catch this episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, as well as our YouTube at Drop the Mets Hockey. Take care, guys, and be safe out there.